but there's the DOK wheel. That's a tool. I've seen folks use DOK question stems documents. I've also seen folks use the Hess's Cognitive Rigor Matrix, which is a combination of Bloom's taxonomy and Webb's depth of knowledge. How do you feel about those tools?
I'll tell you this, the best one and the most accurate one is the Hess matrix. That's how I learned about DOK. Excuse me. That's how I learned about what it really is and what it really stands for. Karen Hess influenced a lot of my work, a lot of my ideas I have about DOK. The problem with the Hess matrix is we Danielson framework it, which is we give this impression that everybody needs to demonstrate and communicate their learning or comprehend and communicate their learning at a DOK3 or DOK4. DOK1 is bad and DOK2 just don't stay there. It is not a value judgment. It defines what exactly and how deeply the students must understand and use their learning to demonstrate proficiency or perform successfully. Karen says when you determine the DOK level of a standard, that's the ceiling of assessment. That you now know that that's the deepest level. A standardized assessment should assess the kids. They won't assess them beyond it because that's unfair. And they won't only assess them at it because it's too difficult, because an assessment assesses range of learning. So you'll have items on there that are DOK1s and DOK2s and DOK3s if that standard is a DOK3. See, that's the other interesting thing about DOK. It was never meant to be an instructional method and model. Norman Webb created it as a criterion for alignment studies. He is a psychometrician. He's a test person. He's a statistician. He's not a teacher, okay? And in terms of the fact that he's not talking about creating instructional experiences, he's looking at it from an evaluative standpoint to say, what is the level of this standard activity or assessment item? And the DOK levels are rating scales, 1, 2, 3, or 4, based upon the demand, what exactly and how deeply. So it was never taxonomy, and it was never meant for teaching. I'm actually bringing that concept back because we have a lot of teachers, unfortunately, out there who are pulling stuff off teacher-paid teachers and AI, thinking that this is addressing and assessing the standard, but it may not be fully aligned and acceptably aligned. It may be insufficiently aligned. That's using the web for it. So can you use DOK to determine the level of the standard and then look at that activity and see which objective in that standard does that activity or assessment address and how closely does it address it? So you brought up the DOK wheel, which is, it's not a matter of not liking it, it's that it's inaccurate. And there's a whole story behind how where that came from. But here's the thing, and I'm asking people, and I'm kind of doing this in my approach now, because I used to come out at people like the DOK wheel's inaccurate, DOK wheel's inaccurate, like a preacher sermonizing. And if you didn't listen to me, I'll shout it louder. And if you push back on me, then I become the prosecutor because I got the evidence, I got the proof. I could tell you which state came up with the DOK wheel and put it out there, and they didn't even vet it. In fact, I got a text from somebody when I was doing a virtual presentation, a keynote, where someone said, I want you to know that we in our state realized our mistake and we tried to go fix it. Okay? Doesn't matter. Let's rethink. There's new data and information. First, Norman Webb on Edutopia, everyone look it up. He finally wrote an article, How to Use Webb's Depth of Knowledge. And he says, I didn't create that wheel. And it's misleading. It's not accurate. So we need to throw it away. It's not another way to do Bloom's, okay? The other thing is what depth of knowledge has become is different than what it originally intended to be. So Norman created it as a criterion for alignment studies. Now Norman will tell you it's a language that tells you what exactly and how deeply students must understand and use their learning. Karen Hess turned it into a measure of cognitive rigor and said the DOK levels establish the ceiling of assessment. I turned it into a method and model for teaching and learning. I made it an RTI, where you start with the standard, tier to the DOK level where students are, and teach, and so guide them to rise to, reach, and go beyond that DOK bar. DOK is not about the cognition. It's about, or the thinking. It's about basically how deep, what exactly and how deeply do you have to comprehend, communicate, and consider what you're learning.